So, I hear England might be dropping out of the EU with a no-deal Brexit.
Well, that's fine. I'm sure they have the right people in the right positions, making the right decisions with no long-term repercussions. You know, I hear the Amazon rainforest is burning down at quite the alarming rate.
Look, that's fine. I'm sure they've got the right people in the right positions, making the right decisions with no long-term catastrophic repercussions. That's fine. Did you catch the Ashes the other day?
It's fine, I think. If they got the right people, it's just so upsetting when your team lets you down.
Oh, Nagy. It's okay. I'm sure that they've got the right people in the right positions, making the right decisions with no long-term repercussions.
And that's fine.
That's fine. I hate September.
Good evening and welcome to the Joust. My name is Nagy. I'm here as always with my trusty co-host Liam McNeil, the man that's been beside me. Well, we're beside each other really, and we're a little bit beside ourselves today, with more news coming out of the Knights camp. Now, this is something that was it was a little bit of a shock on a Tuesday to us all, because last week around the same time we were told that Nathan Brown will be finishing up at the end of this very season.
We were reliably informed that
Yes.
Brownie would be finishing up this season.
Yes, at the end of the season, but will remain with the club. However, today things have changed. Off the back of the uncomfortable loss to the Tigers, it was informed that Brownie will in fact be leaving immediately.
Effective immediately, Nathan Brown will no longer be with the Newcastle Knights. It's taken us all aback, you know. We're all still shocked from the news, and we're not quite sure what to make of it, are we, Nagy?
It was something that again only happened mere moments ago, before it's hit our mics. But the biggest shock that I thought was is that everything seems to be fine from the Knights camp. It's all very, very nice. The water's calm. There's lots of hope there. The press release by Phil Gardner, the man which is increasingly looking more and more like a Disney villain the more he appears on television. But he came out and he said, now, you know, Nathan's a very good friend of mine. He's the nicest bloke in the world, and his time with the club has come to an end, and they've made that decision together, and it's a very amicable split. And look, you'll still see both of us around Christmas, and you'll see Brownie every other Friday, and everything's going to be very nice. And look, you might even get 2 presents out of us.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be a very amicable split. However, Brownie will be leaving today, and today he will no longer be an employee of the Newcastle Knights, because God forbid he stays for another 14 days.
I know, you would think that 2 weeks isn't too much to ask. I mean, usually when you leave a job, you're given 2 weeks notice, or you're given 2 weeks to see out your contract, but it just seems, like you said, everything coming from the club's been, it's all rosy, it's all beautiful, everything's great, but surely there's something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, Nagy.
Not rainbows, not lollipops, but that's what they're showing, and I don't understand why, because we constantly, when it was Brownie would be leaving at the end of the season, it was like, oh, he's been here for 4 years, or a lot of people were sort of pushing, and then after one game, so this season seems to be a write-off, if you will, now after the loss to the Tigers. We had the glimmer of hope if we won our final 3, we would make the 8, but now that's no longer the case. But nothing's really changed. For Brownie to leave today, something must have happened.
That's it. Something must have gone wrong between the Tigers game and now that we don't know about. Something's happened behind the scenes, and again, it just comes back to, it's all so sudden. It's all happened so suddenly, and it seems to be the case. The narrative has been that it's been somewhat driven by Nathan Brown. You know, he was the one who heard they were hunting for a coach, so he tendered his resignation. He's made the decision to quit. It all seems like this all comes back to Nathan Brown, but you got to think that someone up the top had input into this.
Now, there's been a few fingers pointed by a few of the one notable great of the Newcastle Knights, the 8th Immortal
The
himself.
8th Immortal had a lot to say on this topic.
You watched the rant a few times.
I've
It was
watched
a
it
rant.
3 or 4 times, and it was one of the great rants of all time, what Joey said. And, you know, the way he put it, and I don't know how much input Joey has into the club or what he knows about the club, but he seems to think that Troy Pizzette has had something to do with this. Now, Troy Pizzette, for those that don't know, is the Knights recruitment and list manager, which is a big job in and of itself, but it doesn't seem like the kind of job that would, have implications on the coaching staff, on the way the club's run. But, I don't know if Joey was grasping at straws there, or if he was seeing into the insights of the club. But yeah, it seems like this Troy Pizzette may have a case to answer perhaps to the Newcastle fans.
There was an article released this week by the fellow from NRL 360. I was going to say Ross Kemp. It was really not Ross Kemp. It was the fellow by the other name.
You've lost me, Nagy. I'm sorry.
NRL Paul Kent.
Paul Kent.
We'll take that out in post. Do you want to see how Paul Kent came out with an article and sort of, if anything, illustrating a web of connections around the club. Apparently, Phil Gardner, our fearless leader, the only man to stay in the job, has a good connection with Pizzette, and it was sort of implied. Actually, it was very clearly said that they orchestrated Brownie's ousting, and it was Brownie trying to get rid of Pizzette. But little did he know there was a deep connection between Pizzette and Gardner, and so then you have Gardner saying, "Oh well, no, he won't be going. You will be going." And it just seems like it was another page in the soap opera that's been the Knights in the last few weeks.
That's it. It seems a strange horse to get behind. Instead of getting behind your head coach, getting behind your recruitment manager. But another name that's being tossed around a lot in this whole, let's call it what it is, this whole shambles, is the name Isaac Moses. Now, Isaac Moses is the manager of
everyone.
Yeah. He seems to be managing a lot of people.
He manages us.
He manages us. Thank you, Isaac. But a lot of, apparently Isaac's a bit of a power broker in the rugby league, and he's, there's more to cover in the news about Isaac Moses, but that name keeps coming up as well.
I tell you what, the media does like to point the fingers. There's not a lot of answers here, so they're doing a lot of pointing. And they're throwing a lot of people under the bus. Now that Brandy's out of the picture, the fingers keep pointing. So I think basically, what we're going to touch on the news, the wider story.
We will touch on it on the news.
Okay,
but I'll tell you what, Andrew Johns used a word that's very interesting to me regarding the whole situation. He used the word sabotage.
Yeah.
He said the Knights season has been sabotaged. And I think he's absolutely spot on. The way that this has come about and the way that this has happened, it's completely sabotaged any chance the Knights had of making the finals.
Now, Liam, it's Nathan Brown's been part of this club for 4 years. He took us from the absolute doldrums to slightly above the doldrums. I guess he's brought the head slightly above water, but we're still frailing.
We're still kicking.
We're still kicking around. But I tell you what, he gave this club. He walked into a bit of a nightmare, and he's leaving with more controversy. But I tell you what, he's done it with some class, and that. We're gonna open a can of our delicious Murray's 262 to you, Brownie, and one for our fallen homies. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Nathan.
And we don't waste 262 lightly.
No.
We try to consume as much of it as possible. But it's when there's been an occasion like this, Brownie, we salute you, and can we get a mop? No, these are brand new shoes, Brownie. You don't know what we've just gone through. No, it's very sad to see Nathan Brown leaving in the way that he did. There was an opportunity there for Brownie to be leaving at the end of the season in a sort of on his own terms. And you could argue if these are on his terms as well, there's been a massive communication breakdown.
That's it. And I feel like he deserved a lot better. Obviously, he hasn't got the results that anyone wanted, but at the end of the day, he gave his all to this club. He rebuilt it basically from the ground up, and I think he deserves the fans and the players and the whole of the Knights organisation's respect, which doesn't seem like he's been offered. He hasn't really been given a respectful way in which he can finish out his tenure.
It's going to be sad. It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up because, he did, put the... As far as getting the players to play on the field and consistently, no, this season's been none of that. Especially consistency's been that key word. We showed patches. We've done well in patches. Patches, brilliant. And then other patches, terrible.
Most of the other patches.
We've done, yeah. So, I don't know. I think if it was a job like trying to rebuild the club like a Titans job or something like that, you'd think Brandy would be your guy. Because apparently he did a similar thing over at St. Helens.
He did, yeah. He rebuilt St. Helens and had them, I think, winning the Challenge Cup.
Maybe he might be contracted for the new stadium in Sydney.
Hey,
because if you can rebuild a club,
you can rebuild a stadium. Yeah, it's the same principles, a solid foundation.
Yeah,
and then whatever else goes on top of a solid foundation. I don't know much about stadium building.
And then once the stadium's finished, you could see the ground very well in parts.
Yeah,
just in patches.
In patches,
you could see the ground. Other patches not so nice. No, there was a terrible. Like who would want to be an NRL coach?
Oh, you couldn't pay me to do it, and they get paid to do it.
They literally do. It's but it's such an interesting job because you don't really see NRL coaches stick around unless you're like Craig Bellamy, even Wayne Bennett. Now you think, he was shopped around a bit, went back to Brisbane, and then got forced out of the club that arguably he built up. So it's never going to be a long tender, and 4 years is a fair length for a coach. So
I think I was looking at some statistics the other day, and Nathan Brown was actually the 5th highest, the coach with the 4th or 5th current highest tenure. So compared to a lot of other NRL coaches, he'd been in the job for quite a while.
It was always going to be an interesting scenario with the ongoing contract to see how long it actually went, and with the latest media releases, I'm sure we're going to hear more from Brownie in the next coming days.
Oh, wait for the tell-all book. That's the one I want to. That's the one I want to read.
What would it be called? The Brown Years.
Browntown.
Probably, yeah. The Long Browns.
The long eyebrow.
The long eyebrow. Which that's
Charlton Burton.
Charlton Burton.
That
It's
one
a
was.
fantastic film.
Beautiful film.
Now there's a lot else has happened in this thing, but like, where do we go from here, Liam? Now we've got Adam O'Brien apparently about to come into the side.
Look, according to Barry Toohey, the deal's as good as done. The deal's written up. It's a multi-year contract and will come into effect at the start of next season. But apparently, according to Barry, the deal is to be announced next week.
It's going to be an interesting tenure and appointment for a new coach, because if I was coming into a job that you had a coach that my predecessor just got asked to leave and then got asked immediately to leave, and obviously the club will say, well, this is what's happened with Brownie, we're going to try to avoid that. But to have the power ladder in there of you've got the director of football, Brian Canavan,
yep.
And then you've got Pizzette, the rostering manager,
recruitment guru,
who was previously filled by Mooney, who was also given the ask. So I don't know. It's just like when Ivan Cleary went to the Panthers and he didn't want any meddling from Gus Gould. He said, "I don't want Gus Gould anywhere to do with me. I need to have full control of this side." But then you've got someone like Adam O'Brien coming into the side, which he might not have that kind of clout to do.
And he's never been a head coach. This will be his first head coaching role. He's always been an assistant, including rep teams. I think we were talking earlier. He was Craig Fitzgibbon's assistant in the country camp.
Yeah.
He worked under Bellamy for anywhere between 8 and 13 years, depending which article you read. He's under Trent Robinson now.
Yeah.
So he's always been an assistant coach. So it'll be really interesting to see how he handles the step up to head coach.
Yeah.
And especially under a board who seem to be scrutinising the role almost constantly. It's a tough role to come straight into.
I think with what you get with West, you get a lot, because they are controlled obviously by the club of the West Group, which is controlled by the board. You got to remember the board members are not administrating people. Like they are board members there on from all respects in voluntary positions. They're meant to be people that are. That have a huge say, but they also have the ear to the ground. They're the people that you sit next to in the pub. They're the people that are very in touch with the community, and that sort of negative feedback echoes back directly to them. So it's definitely you'd have to have a very strong will to be able to convince the board that you're not only the right guy, but you're making the correct decisions. Because it seems to be at the Knights now, you've got a lot of people making decisions, and they're all having repercussions on other people.
That's it. They're big repercussions too. Yeah, absolutely.
We obviously went into the Tigers game, Liam, with hopes and dreams, and this is going to be our final run. Do it for Brownie, I think, was even mentioned a few times with a hashtag, and
instead they thought it said "Do it Brownlee."
Do it Brownlee,
and they did it very Brownlee.
It was. Where did you watch the game, Liam?
I didn't watch the game, Nagy. I had it on at work, and it seemed like every time I looked up at the screen, the Tigers had scored again. And so, as you jousters would know, every Tuesday I sit down to watch the game, and I diligently take my notes and I prepare for the evening, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it this week. Having spoken to you about the game previously, and having seen what other Knights fans are putting up on social media and what the fans are saying, I just could not put myself through it. I couldn't bring myself to watch the game. So I actually haven't seen the game, Nagy. So you're on your own here, mate.
That's all right. No, what's really?
I believe the word you used was depressing.
Depressing.
Yeah.
Disappointing. I think it was
disappointing.
There was. I think a lot of it, what the Knights just didn't play like a team that deserved to be in the finals or fighting for a final spot. Unlike the Tigers. Tigers are out there in Campbelltown, one of their spiritual homes in Campbelltown, and for them, they played like a team that wanted to be in the finals. Their efforts from Brooks and Marshall was perfect, and I think not enough people have given them credit on how well they played.
Yeah, that's something you brought up earlier, that it's all doom and gloom for the Knights, but people have ignored largely how well the Tigers played.
Yeah, there was a few missed opportunities for the Knights early on. Once with Bradman Best, who's coming in as an 18-year-old debutant who knocks the ball on and basically his first touch of the football, and Fitzgibbon could have got home for a try. And then we got a cutout pass from Kalen Ponga, a pass that has been thrown time and time again from Kalen that has ended up with points on the ball with a try, and then that got intercepted, and then they run the near length of the field and score on the other end. So then you've got a 12-point turnaround there. I don't think the Knights, the way they played, or the effort that seemed to be apparent in compared to the Tigers, could have even beaten that side over 80 minutes. However, it could have been a very different game in the first 15 minutes. And suddenly they were fighting a team full of enthusiasm, and where the Knights, their opportunities weren't coming off, every one of the Tigers' opportunities in the first 15 minutes just found hands. They just did everything right, and they scored plenty of points, and they shell-shocked us out of the game very quickly. And it was very upsetting. I was in Sydney seeing Tom Gleeson.
Very funny man.
Very funny man. And that was after watching the game. And then that was down in Sydney in the Opera House. Coming back from watching Tom Gleeson would have been around, I dare say, 11 o'clock. And we're at... it was late. It was in Sydney, and we're at Central. And I was coming back down the Newcastle line. And there were some people coming back from Campbelltown.
They must have been shell-shocked now.
Sad to see. There was some families, there was lots of people in red and blue, lots of people wanting their side just to do well, hitting, getting into the finals for the first time in a long time, and disappointment. It's already a disappointing journey coming back from Sydney at that time of night. Oh, getting on that train at all. The good old Criminals Airway, as it's often called, and it was all stops from Hornsby. Character building experience as it was, and a lot of these people were going right back into the heart of Newcastle, and so I felt really bad seeing just how much effect it had on them and on me. Huge disappointment from the team that But as I said earlier in the week, haven't we? Our season's over, but haven't we had this discussion at least 3 or 4 times already?
Well, that's it. I think I brought it up last time we played the Tigers. I thought that loss was the end of our season. There were various points through the 5-game losing streak where people discussed the end of our season.
And then there was, of course, we've got the game against Parramatta. That was the end of our season. And then
we seem to have been over this a number of times.
And is it? I know we had a very strong win against the Cowboys, but at the same time, that boat has sailed. Of us being a finalist contender and coming through and winning, and I think we said last week that I think they're going to. I said that they're going to win 2 from 3, but I thought they're going to beat the Tigers, beat the Titans, and then lose to Penrith.
Yes.
With that kind of performance and the way that the Titans are playing, they might lose all 3.
Yeah.
And no coach.
Losing 3, getting knocked out, and no coach. What a familiar time for Newcastle to be.
Gee, we've seen some rough times during this podcast.
It's been rough. I think that's the biggest thing for me out of it all. The people who this is affecting most is the fans. Those depressed people you saw on the train, the people who I see, going into the game, the people who sit around at my work and yell at the TV screens while I'm behind the bar not doing any work because I'm yelling at the TV screens as well.
Yes.
That's the people who are getting hit. Maybe not as hard as Brownie because he's literally been fired from his job, and that's always hard.
Yeah, no, but
it's hard for the fans.
Yeah, we had a lot of faith coming in.
We deserve a lot better. I don't generally have a sense of entitlement about what I do and don't deserve. Realistically, I don't deserve anything from this club, but I think the fans, in the large part, deserved a bit better than what the Knights put up against the Tigers.
It's very true. We're going to have a quick halftime break, and we're going to be right back to talk about this week's game, what's left of the season. Got to hit the news and the mail sack. We'll see you in a little bit. Also, that table says I'm leaving.
Yes.
Welcome back to the second half of the Joust. Now, Liam, I've got a couple of conspiracy theories, and God knows I love a conspiracy
You're
theory.
a nut for conspiracy theories, Nagy. If
Oh.
I know anything about you, I know that you love a conspiracy
I
theory.
like the idea of them. I just think they're fantastic. Some of them are ludicrous and it's great, but it gives me something to think about. Now, one of them is illustrated by what I touched on earlier. Paul Kent wrote an article, and he said now Isaac Moses is in the picture heavily, and his end goal is he wants to have Ponga under his wing, right?
Yes.
And also he's already the manager for Adam O'Brien. And then the Knights have said, we want Adam O'Brien. Isaac Moses, can you get Adam O'Brien here? But also, he's like, well, I'd love to give you Adam, but maybe if you give me a little bit of Kalen Ponga. Now, this is where I get sick. Now, the Knights have said they're not going to talk to Kalen Ponga's current manager, which is an interesting thing to try to re-sign, one of the most talented players in the comp by saying we're not actually going to talk to the guy who does all your negotiations.
Exactly, and that manager at the moment is Wade Rushton, and he's apparently a bit on the outer. We're about to cover that in the news, but we'll go into it now.
We're going to drive right in.
We're going to drive right through it.
No,
But
no.
yeah, so Wade Rushton is his current manager, but as you mentioned, the club apparently will not negotiate with Wade Rushton. They will only negotiate with Ponga's next manager once the management issue becomes sorted, and it is looking like it's going to be Isaac Moses.
If it's Isaac Moses, Paul Kent's right on the money, and he's drawn all the right connections, because the very man who used to work with Isaac Moses at Titan Management was our very own Troy Pizzette. So you all start to think, okay, are they trying to get everyone in the club, or you have your coach and your marquee player and about half the roster of every other NRL club coached by Isaac Moses?
Well, it's not like NRL managers have ever done anything untoward. They're definitely a very sneaky people.
I suppose it's a way just to keep everyone on side, and you're not going to have any poaching going on if the manager's in touch with the club. Now, that draws Troy Pizzette back into the frame around. Was this all orchestrated back with Phil Gardner? Does he pull the strings? My theory on this whole thing is probably, but also this happens all the time. This is not something special to the Knights. This is not something like they're not three people around like a big smoking cauldron and saying, oh, we're gonna do this and it's gonna be magical. But this is sort of things that will happen often around players and long-term contracts and keeping people in the right places so they can be not controlled, but you know what I mean. You have more control over the situation, so it's not such an open market. It's more of a controlled market. So Paul Kent brought that to light, and I like those sorts of things, but at the same time, it's upsetting to see it happen to a club like ours. I have my own theory about the Knights, though.
What's your theory about the Knights, Nagy?
A lot of attention by the Sydney media. More attention now than probably since the Tinkler era, but that was all more sort of rosy. But when the Tinkler era sort of started to collapse, we got a bit of attention. But this is really targeted, and a lot of it's been on our very own Kalen Ponga.
You think there's a target on his back?
Well, the one thing that Kalen Ponga has stated again and again, he likes Newcastle. He likes being in Newcastle. He likes playing for Newcastle.
What's not to like about Newcastle?
Well, now you could say that it's just because he's a marquee player and now everything he says in the paper's been held. But when he was asked about Nathan, sorry, there's been lots of Nathans going around. Nathan Brown. When Nathan Brown was leaving, he wrote. He was asked an article and he said he's made me the player that I am today. And that's a nice thing to say about the coach. And then they asked a more direct question. What did you feel when you heard the news?
And that was the famous strawberry milkshake line. This is where the Sydney media got a lot of their fodder from, the strawberry milkshake clause.
And then he says, look, I was having a strawberry milkshake, and then they said, oh, well, he's obviously disrespectful. He's obviously got nothing about it. Maybe then quickly after this, Buzz Rossfield, your favourite journalist.
Dear friend of the show, Buzz Rossfield. I know he listens religiously. Good to have you on board, Buzz.
You could probably be maybe related to Buzz. You have a bit of a buzz.
I've got that rosy glow that only
yeah.
alcohol can bring.
Can you do your buzz? I know.
I can do my buzz. Yeah.
It just,
I don't know what to say though,
just
Nagy.
looking
What do I
over,
say? It's looking over the glasses, looking at
says,
your sheet, and then occasionally leaning in like this, saying, "Look,
yeah,
no, Nagy, look, this is not the way it should be, Nagy."
Back in my day,
we all rode horses around and had carts. Yeah.
Now Buzz came out and says, now a key Knights player, high-profile Knights player, is very happy that Nathan Brown's been given the ask because...
Did he name names, Nagy?
No, never does. It was one of his shush columns, where it's just 6 words. And then he says because they were barely on talking terms. Now, there's only 3 high-profile players in the Newcastle Knights side.
Pierce, Ponga, Clemmer.
Pierce, Ponga, Clemmer. So a lot of people would have drawn the two together and gone, oh, well, obviously Ponga's not happy with Brownie. And created their own narrative. So these kinds of things, putting a lot of pressure on Kalyn Ponga playing for the Knights, is not what you see around other contract negotiations when they're playing for larger Sydney clubs, like a James Tedesco. James Tedesco recently with the whole third-party agreements thing was quickly shut down, and there was he didn't give anything. He wasn't. The very little access they've had to Kalyn Ponga, and in the very honest answers, that they're making his life very uncomfortable. My thoughts are that it's the Sydney media trying to bully him out of being happy at Newcastle.
Bully him into a Sydney team, you reckon?
I've said it. I said to you earlier, Liam. I feel like Kalyn Ponga is just a nice big leg of lamb, and all the NRL clubs or all their power brokers are just hyenas, and they don't care what that leg of lamb looks like when they finally get it.
But they want their leg of lamb.
They want that leg of lamb, and that leg of lamb is that when he's 24 years old and looking to sign a new contract, probably the largest contract of his life, and possibly the largest contract of the NRL if he continues to prosper. It's got to be a very interesting time, and I feel like there's something going on. The same way that Paul Kent's been drawing lines to say there's lots of different people involved, I feel it's the same.
There's definitely more to it than what we've seen so far.
He doesn't have clean hands, Paul Kent. Let me just say like this. If you think so that he can write articles and put pressure on certain people and make people make decisions, he's been in this game long enough to know that he's just one of them. He can point that finger but point the other hand right back at himself.
Yeah.
And
if you stare long enough into the abyss stares back into you, Nagy.
And I'm taking it personally, Liam. I had to get that off my chest.
Well, I'm glad you did, Nagy. I'm glad you did. You look relieved. Your shoulders have dropped a bit. You were carrying a lot of tension through the top there. I'm glad you've relieved yourself.
That's what Martin, my Chinese masseuse, says.
Acupuncturist.
Yeah,
in fact, it's not called Chinese massage, Nagy.
That's how he advertises himself. Lovely, man. Thank you, Martin, for fixing my back.
But look, that brings us to our next item in the news. Who will be taking over as interim coach? Now, the interim coach role, which is, arguably at its most important with 2 weeks left in the season, will be filled by Christian Wolf, the former assistant coach, now to be interim coach. So he'll be filling in for the next 2 games before he heads off to the Super League to form his own career. Do you think Christian Wolf can turn it around in 2 weeks? I don't know. I don't know.
What's turning it around? Is it just beating the Titans?
Yes, absolutely.
Christian Wolf, as I think even Sam, our producer, said early on, he reminds me of that the scary guy that comes in front of Superintendent Chalmers. That's it. You little freaks. with the vein popping in.
Yeah.
He seems like the scary guy of the coaching team. I don't know. Maybe he's a defense guy.
Brownie certainly wasn't the scary guy.
No, he's like the stepdad that sort of like wants to be everyone's friend before leaving again. But Christian Wolf does seem like he's got just physical presence about him.
A bit more oomph behind him, do you reckon?
I don't know. Like a lot of these, there was also one article written about another coach, a Super League coach. I didn't even catch his name, but they said that he's a no-nonsense operator. And he must have got 80 comments of people just going, he sounds like the guy that we need. And I was like, this is one-line assessment over over
and
coach.
what does that imply about Brownie? Was he a nonsense operator? Did he allow nonsense in his squad?
Apparently so. Apparently you have nonsense operators and no-nonsense operators. And what we had...
And never the twain shall meet.
We had a nonsense operator. It's much like my mother used to say, I don't have mucking around time. And I thought, when do you? I suppose this is mucking around.
This is mucking around time. What we do is mucking around.
We have mucking around time. Christian Wolf is, he's already been signed by St Helens. Was right before Brownie's exit as well. It's all happened. So he's coming in for a 2-game tender. And it's going to be, what does he have to do? Win 1 out of 2, and he's got a pretty good record.
Yeah, well, he can't get fired.
Well, can he?
Good point. If he loses against the Titans, he's done. He's out. That's it. Phil Gardner's going to take over himself personally.
That's what I wouldn't mind seeing it. It's going to be an interesting thing. What else we got in the news? Then?
That's it for the news this week. I figured we should keep it Knights focused, and I knew we'd have plenty to cover.
Heaps.
Regarding Brownie. So that's it for the news this week. But next week, Nagy, as we mentioned, there is still another game to play. As much as the season's over and it's all just getting very tiresome to follow.
There was one other article that said that the Knights have a slim chance of still making the finals with the last two.
There is a slim... If the Broncos lose their next 2 games, and if the Panthers, I believe, lose their next 2 games, and Cronulla loses one of two, I think.
It's just ridiculous.
If the Panthers lose one of two, Brisbane lose two, and Cronulla lose one or two, we can still make it. But
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
It's beyond mattering now.
It's ridiculous the fact that we possibly can on 24 points.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be able to make it on 26 points, and a side that always makes 28 points is usually like, oh well, you've been lucky to make the 8, because some years has been 30 points. I don't understand. Like, obviously, there's one less round this year. Look, it's just we don't deserve to be there, and I hope, like in many ways, I hope this season doesn't drag on any longer.
I just
than it
want
needs
it
to
to finish at this point, Nagy. I just want it to be over. Honestly, it's just been a season of such a roller coaster of emotions and feelings
and not
of
a good roller coaster.
Experiences. No.
Like the Lethal Weapon, a movie where we're like, I might actually die on this.
Like one of those clunky old roller coasters at the local fair where you're sitting in the cart and it's made of wood and it's kind of clanking around and you never feel safe. It's been one of those seasons this year, and at this point, I think all Knights fans are just, we're looking to the end now. We're just counting down the seconds until we can all have our own private Mad Monday.
Just make it stop.
Just make it stop. Stop. He's already dead.
This weekend, we've got Old Boys Day against the Titans.
Old Boys Day against the Titans.
The last home game of the season.
The last home game of the season. Now, Nagy, a lot of Knights fans are calling for a boycott.
Yes.
I've seen this theme pop up throughout the Knights Facebook pages and throughout the Knights fan pages and Twitter and basically everywhere throughout the peanut gallery that Knights fans should boycott the last game of the season to show their discontent with the way things have gone on. I shan't be boycotting. I'm going to go to the game. I will be there because I still think it's important to support the team, and especially for the old boys, to support the old boys. I think we need a really good crowd out there because we know what the old boys have brought to the club. We know what they're all about, and what they do is, fantastic. So I would advise against boycotting. If I'm being quite diplomatic, I would advise against boycotting. Let's get out of the game in big numbers and show Adam O'Brien just why he might want to come to the club. Because if he sees that the Knights fans have given up, if he sees that the Knights fans don't want a bar of a losing team, he might not, it might colour his opinion of the way things work. I think it's a good opportunity to show Adam O'Brien what Knights fans are all about and give him an early indicator as to what we expect.
Also, on that, I'm a big fan of a protest, don't get me wrong. Love a good protest. A good walkout, even. But at the same time, it's usually to achieve something.
Yes.
We've just sacked the coach. The coach is now actually gone. What will we be achieving by not rocking up?
A boycott achieves nothing.
It's in this case, it's achieving nothing. If there was a coach that the club refused to sack and we just kept failing year and year and year, possibly. But in this sense, it's just like, just rock up. In the end, we're supporters. And when you're supporting a team, you're supporting them at the lowest. So you can be there and enjoy it when you're at the highest.
Which God knows Knights fans have supported through the lowest.
And I've paid for a membership. And I'm going to try to get the most out of that membership. Because, if I wasn't at the game, I'd be watching it right here at the Commonwealth Hotel.
At the Commonwealth Hotel. It's a fantastic venue.
It's considering I will be there, and I think everyone should be there because we get a good win against the Titans. You're watching it at home. There's always going to be a part of you think I should have gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
God knows getting a win at home is special at any point in the last few years.
It's a rare and beautiful gem, Nagy. Rare and beautiful gem.
So 100% that I think the boycott's the most. It's a way. I understand people are angry, they're disappointed, they want to act on something. But it's just not the right way.
It doesn't achieve.
Eventually, we beat the Titans, and you buy your membership next year, and you think, oh, we'll give it another go. Just stay with them.
Stay with the boys. You stayed with them through the spoons. Stay with them through this.
Or just pick another team to support. Stop going on the Knight supporters pages and saying how you don't support them anymore. Just stop supporting them. That's how you move with your feet. You know what I mean? Like you just literally say, that's it. I'm done.
Yes.
But I can't do that.
But there has been one change. Connor Watson comes back in at hooker. You think that's going to affect the Knights?
He's been playing great.
He's been playing very well.
He's. I think we really missed him last week, but I don't think we could have got any more ascendancy with what we did. We threw a bit at the Tigers. We just couldn't pull off any points.
But who the hell knows what's going to happen on the field on Saturday? That's all I've written here for next week v Titans. Who the hell knows? Because I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen. What night side's going to turn up? Who's going to run out? And in what mental capacity they'll be? I just can't.
Leo, I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'd be having a good look at that $3.85 of the Titans.
That's it. That's pretty favourable odds, I think.
Isn't it just like $3.85?
That turns an easy tenner into a night out with the missus.
Where you go? The movies?
Not
to
very expensive
see-
places. When we go to the movies, we go to Hoyt's, the cheap film.
The cheap film.
The
yeah.
cheap film.
Yeah, $7. No,
No,
how
it's
much is it?
$13 now.
Did it used to be $7?
It used to be $10.
$10.
I think before that it might have been $7, but that's going back a decade and a half
We're
now.
going to end up these old guys go, I used to go to the movies with the thrippins and
We're the next Buzz Rothfields
a,
of the NRL.
and a box of
And
Sayos.
a box of Sayos, it only costs you 25 cents
And Hoyts.
at Hoyt's.
Hoyts doesn't make films anymore. Lee, we better open your sack. I think
We
it's
better
so
open
good.
the sack. It's a big sack this week, guys. Thank you very much for all the interest, given I put the sack up very late. First question is from Rick Peter. With the club putting Ponga's contract talks on hold until he changes management, does this leave the door open for him to rethink extending or possibly leaving as something bigger and better may come along?
As I said before, he's under so much pressure. I'd just be so happy to be anywhere else except the amount of scrutiny he's copping at the moment. It's not, that the club's not making it an inviting place to stay for someone that's going to be committing another 4 to 6 years here. And the media, it's the same kind of attention that he's receiving from the rugby league media, which is only when there's a catastrophe we'll talk to you, is making things like if you're with the All Blacks and you're touring around the world constantly and you're playing in front of these packed stadiums and you'd be like, well, that's going to be a much better option. I'm just saying the door is open for Caleb Ponga to do what he likes when this contract's finished, and he's not making the Knights aren't making this too appealing place to stay.
Yeah, well, that's it. It really comes back to the club in that instance. The club needs to make it a place where he wants to stay. The club needs to make a place where Caleb Ponga is going to be for the entirety of his career. And if the club can't do that, then hell, he deserves to sign elsewhere because he's a phenomenal talent, and he needs to be at a club that is going to make the most of his talent. And if the Knights can't capitalise on that, and if the Knights can't make an environment where he can play his best, and we don't deserve him, to be quite honest. So I think he very much leaves the door open to him rethinking extending, and if the club within the next 2 years to go on his contract, within the next 2 years on his contract, if the club doesn't make it a place where he really wants to be, then I think absolutely he'll rethink extending.
He's got 15 other options out there in the NRL, and there's nothing about he's not from Newcastle. There's nothing keeping him here, as someone said, he's got family here, but he's probably got family in New Zealand and family in Queensland.
He's got family
as well.
all over the place.
Much
You
like
listen to
all of
his
us do.
accent. He's got family everywhere.
Yeah.
Anthony Hickling asks, with the awesome roster we have underperforming yet again, is the town of Newcastle maybe the problem? The players love coming here because of the easy coastal lifestyle and being the big things in town, but perhaps it's the easygoing mentality that's holding the players back from greatness. Now, this is a well thought out question from Anthony Hickling. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah.
And
Which is rare for you, Anthony.
I didn't want to be the one to say it. Thank you, Nagy.
That's right.
And I was thinking about this question today, and I'm not too sure whether it holds any weight or whether it has anything to do with it, but it does seem to be the case that the players come here, they like the lifestyle, they like what the town has to offer, they like that there's a bit less scrutiny than in Sydney in the bubble or the fish bowl as they call it in Sydney. So I think players definitely come here expecting life to be a lot easier, and especially knowing what the fans are like, they know that even in the toughest times the fans will still support them and not turn on them, whereas if you go to other clubs like St George, for example, the fans will turn on you in a heartbeat.
Yeah, 15,000 one week and then 6 the following.
Same with clubs
Sharks,
like Manly, Sharks, anything like that. Whereas if you're coming to Newcastle, you know the crowds are going to turn out. You know that people are going to sing your praises. You know that you're going to have good support. I think your theory may hold some water, Anthony, that maybe players do see Newcastle as a bit of an easy option.
Yeah.
But to what extent, I don't know.
Possibly, but I don't feel like the lifestyle, they're putting their feet up and saying, oh, well, I'm only in Newcastle.
Look, at least it's not the retirement home club that it once was under under Wayne Bennett.
Yeah, signing players like Tamana Tahu and Anthony Quinn that, played 10 games collectively and then, retired here. It's just, I don't know. I don't think it's too much to do with location. I can see why you can point the finger, but look, arguably when grand finals were won here, there was very fast and loose with how the players were playing.
Well, that's the other thing. People talk about a party culture in the team. We were at our best when we had a party culture.
I never buy into
the party culture.
Party culture doesn't exist. The fact that there are 16. Thank you for fixing that up, Liam.
Okay.
There's 16 clubs,
all
out there.
filled with young men earning a lot of money. They're all partying.
Storm's partying, Sharks are partying, they're all partying.
Some just party harder than others.
Oh, here's the Sharks.
Yeah. Next. Well, this one's not really a question. It's more of a statement. Hi, gents. From Liam Jones. Thank you, Jonesy. Hi, gents. You should take the week off. The Knights certainly did. Cheers, Jonesy.
That's probably pretty apt.
Yeah, pretty out there. Next question from Dan Howard. Should Knights fans fear another rebuild is coming? The players just played like they didn't want to be there. I don't think the club needs another rebuild. Nathan Brown seems to have done a good enough job of establishing the junior pathways and rebuilding the club from the ground up and getting the what's the word, the roster he wants. I don't think we need to fear another rebuild. Yeah. It'll just be the coach coming in and establishing his personality on the team and setting the team in the direction that he wants to go. I think Adam O'Brien's job will be more concerned with getting the first grade side heading in the right direction as opposed to rebuilding the club. So, Dan, I don't think we need to fear another rebuild. I think we're all good on that front.
I think there's going to be some sort of rebuild. Like, like it has
little
to be.
Rebuild.
Yeah, well, it's
a little bit of a rebuild.
Off a structure that's already existing.
Yeah.
And I spoke about this.
So the bones are there. We're just replacing we're replacing the fibro with some nice concrete rendering, not a cement rendering,
not a 15-16 rebuild into that period. No, we won't see that again. We've got structure there. We're just missing a few key points, and I think the keys are around the outside backs. Another winger, another centre. Keeping Sione in the back row, and
but with the debut of Bradman Best, do you think we need that other winger? I think Bradman Best coming through.
18.
He's 18. He's young,
18.
but he showed promise.
You can't put the weight of a position like wing these days on an 18-year-old. Coming up against someone like
very important position.
Coming up against someone like Jean Rapana,
or a Blake Ferguson,
makes
for
his
example,
life makes life hell. It was good to see him perform the way he did, and he's a monster for 18.
Isn't he just?
But at the same time, he's 18. I think you'd be mad if you picked Bradman Best to be your starting winger in your first, in your first 17, and you hadn't planned. You'd put him in the squad and say, look,
train with the boys, have a bit of fun.
Give them hell, and you're going to be put up there on times, but not consistently. So I think there needs to be another depth winger, depth centre to replace Ramian. I need to jump back. I'm sorry, I hate to do this.
Jump away.
There's something that happened through the week that's really shocked me. As far as there was reports that they offered Ramian a contract again to come back.
Now, doesn't that just speak to what little faith they had in Nathan Brown? That as soon as Nathan Brown has been announced as leaving, they've told Jesse Ramian, "Oh boy, you could come back. You could certainly come back to the club."
It's worrying for a lot of reasons. One of them was that obviously now he's a centre on the market, and I suppose it's anyone's game, but they've just showed him the door. And it's like, oh, the guy who sacked you just gone. Do you want to come? You can come back next year. He's gone, but also at that point, Brandy was still with the club. It showed a lot of disrespect for Brandy's decisions, considering at the time he was still staying, and also it shows how much obviously there's people in the club that want him to play there, and Brandy didn't. So obviously there's a disconnect there, but things weren't, roses as far as the club's communication. It just showed that there is a real breakdown, and I was really disappointed to see, because there's lots of centres to play in the NRL, and there's probably a few on the market that are of decent calibre. Why go after the guy you've just sacked?
I don't know, Nagy. That's a very interesting
question. That's my question for the sack.
Yeah, well, should I answer it?
No.
What was the question again?
Don't worry.
I've forgotten entirely. Next question is from Daniel Turner. Does Pizzette deserve to lose his job over the events which led to the loss on the weekend? I can't say I know enough about his role in the whole debacle that he should lose his job. It does seem like he's been very highly involved, but I couldn't speak with enough authority to say that he certainly should be fired. But it'll all come out eventually, I would hope.
Adam O'Brien, if he comes to the club, needs to have very clear boundaries to say, I don't want, this guy stepping on my toes behind my back, and I don't want this person being involved with this. I want Brian Canavan to do this job. I want Troy Pizzette to do recruiting and roster management, and that's it. And I don't want to have any communication with the current players or anything like that. You'd have to be like, this is my playground, I'm playing in it, and you can take your ball and go home.
Well, it was as you mentioned earlier to me, Nagy. It's similar to what Ivan Cleary did when he went back to Penrith at the start of this year. He said, no Phil Gould, I don't want Phil Gould involved, blah, blah, blah. And you've got to establish boundaries. So I think it'd be important for Adam O'Brien to certainly establish some boundaries, as you mentioned, and say to these people, this is your role, this is what you're doing. But as head coach, he's still answerable to the board, and if Pizzette is in the board's pocket or vice versa, that could be tough for Adam O'Brien. He could, feasibly be coming into a situation where he's hamstrung completely by the board and by the higher-ups at the club.
A lot of chefs in the kitchen at the moment.
A lot of chefs in the kitchen.
And they're putting out a pretty stinky stew.
They're not tasting as they go. No.
Not seasoning.
No seasoning whatsoever. It's not fresh, local produce. It's not. Now, Gavin Morton... we've actually pretty much answered Gavin Morton's question.
Fuck off, Gavin.
Who the hell is Pizzette and why did the call him out in particular? Justin Guillon asks, are we at risk of losing everything that has been worked towards during the rebuilding process with the current situation that we are seeing played out before our eyes? I don't think so. I don't think it's as drastic as what we went through at the end of the Tinkler era.
We didn't have marquee players. We didn't have we were owned by the NRL, which you operate about 90% of your salary cap. You've got your boss looking over your shoulder in the NRL with everything you do. So all these sort of shifty brown paper bag deals that every club seems to do doesn't happen. What we have now is ongoing funding. We've got a decent marquee. We have marquee players both in the forwards and the backs. That's why it's different this time around. So
Junior Pathways, Brownie seems to have sorted that out as well.
I think I said Junior Paulo.
Junior Paulo. He'd be a great addition to the club.
Well, maybe he would be.
Who knows? But yeah, I think we're not in for what we've been through before. So it makes sense.
We won't go backwards.
It makes sense for Knights fans to catastrophise purely because of what we know can happen to a rugby league club.
Yep.
But I don't think it's going to be as bad this time. I think the foundation is now there. The foundation exists, and we just need to chuck up the walls, bit of a roof. We don't need a fancy big McMansion, just a nice little two-bedder, maybe an old miner's cottage.
Maybe a living room with some double aspects, plenty of light, north-facing.
Sunken living room, perhaps.
Yeah. Sunken living room.
Yeah, I like a sunken living room.
So one level, but you go down a few steps.
Essentially, yes.
Carpeted.
Yes. And last question for the night. Katrina O'Brien, I thought the West Group was our club's saviour, but have serious reservations on our club moving forwards. By all accounts, Philip Gardner is a one-man band, not consulting Brian Canavan, Director of Football, or the Football Committee, consisting of Danny Badiris and John Quayle. What are your thoughts? Now, if it is the case that Phil Gardner is not answering to
a one-man
the Football
band
Committee,
and
if he is acting as a one-man band,
with a horn under his arm, and a drum on his back, and a harmonica that's fixed there,
the mouth organ, and the drums played by the feet, hammering the feet, then that's not a good thing. If
whistle behind the ear.
You end up
and a bell on the back of his leg. So it'd be great to see.
This one-man band, actually, I'm kind of liking the idea. We should try and set that up, a one-man band festival in Newcastle.
Yeah,
it'd be the first of its kind in the world.
I remember at halftime in one of the Newcastle Knights games that I went to probably, 10 years ago, they had an air guitar competition. And I remember thinking, this is all right, but how did we get to this point?
Yeah.
I think it was
How is that entertainment?
I think it was a KOFM promotion. It was very odd for halftime, seeing these guys. None of them really getting into it. Interesting question. It's definitely showing that things aren't working at the moment, but they are new to this whole NRL game. We've got to remember.
West are fresh.
They've
never owned an NRL club before.
Yeah. It's I'm confident. It's there's some nicer things going to happen, but. I think we'll go forwards. We won't go backwards. I think winning 9 games of the season, we're on the cusp of finals, which we have been for some reason for 5 weeks now. But I don't feel like we win one more game and suddenly we've done better than the year before. We keep most of our roster. I don't feel like we're going to go backwards.
Excellent. Well, that's you'll get that same sentiment from me, Nagy. I don't think we're going backwards. I don't think we're rebuilding. I think we're all good. Now, on to the lower grades. Now, for the lower grades last week, Jersey Flegg had a loss, unfortunately, against the Rabbitohs 32-4. Their next game is away against the Newtown Jets. Canterbury Cup last week scored a win over the Rabbits, 36-32, with Ben Talty.
Who's Ben Talty, Liam?
He's a good friend of the family. My father and his father actually played juniors together, and I believe his father and myself packed a scrum in the front bar right here at the Commonwealth Hotel many, many years ago on the piss. It was a good night. That was the night I found out about my dad's friendship with this gentleman just over the bar at the pub. And so Ben Talty, well done, 3 tries. And
3 tries or something, isn't it?
It's fantastic, considering he's still eligible for Flegg. He's still an under-20s player.
Yeah.
Stepped up into Canterbury Cup in the second row and scored 3 tries. And the next home game will be against the Sharks for Canterbury Cup.
Fingers crossed for them. Are there any chance of making the finals?
Canterbury Cup, I don't think so, but Jersey Flag, I'm fairly certain of running fourth.
Let's hopefully. Are they all playing on Saturday? Do you know? I should have asked you this before the show.
Potentially. They're
Get
playing
down there on Saturday and potentially see the undergrades playing as well. It's because they're possibly our future.
If not, I'm sure there'll be some football on somewhere that you can go and watch.
Liam,
On a Saturday afternoon, this country is never short of football.
where are you going to be on Saturday afternoon, Liam?
I'm going to be in my seat, Bay 17, seat J22,
Oh,
I
slow
think.
down, Rain Man. Yeah.
I was way off.
I'll be somewhere in general admission, floating around with the punters, because that's where I like to be. Not up there with the hoity-toities with
No,
your seats.
I'm going to be on the piss drinking hill. Don't you worry about that. Don't you worry about that.
We're looking forward to seeing you all down there. Let's not boycott this game because, come on, in the grand scheme of things, let's just keep on supporting them. It works out better and it's better financially when you pay for a membership. $3.85 does look alright for the Titans, but maybe hedge your bets. Maybe put something on the Titans, but emotionally invest in the Newcastle Knights. That's the way we do it here in Newcastle. Thank you very much for joining me, Liam. We haven't got too many shows to go. It's all coming towards a very exciting
getting
end.
towards the end of the year, and as we mentioned earlier, I think Knights fans and us, we're just tired. We just want it all to end.
If we do win this game by some spectacular fashion and then we're in finals contention again, I might just, I don't know, go to
Have a holiday.
Zimbabwe or something over there for
Yeah.
Spain.
Oh.
Just to get away from it because I
Yeah.
can't deal with another we've got a season on the line game. It's just too much.
It's exhausting.
It's so exhausting.
Imagine
It's-
being a fan of a successful team.
If you like us on Facebook, I know, wouldn't it be not
It'd be
fun?
terrible.
Like us on Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, Twitter, Instagram, iTunes, all those social pipes. Thank you very much for joining us for another week. We'll hopefully see you again next week, talking about a miraculous win under the guidance
Terrible
of
circumstances.
terrible circumstances, and hopefully no one else gets sacked, including you, Mitchell Pearce. There was that rumor going around also. We'll talk about it next week. See you later, Justice. We'll talk to you soon.